Cool.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Wildcat Fanalytics, Mike and Jesse here. Yes, backing the A
Hacking the
after
A.
a slightly convincing win over the Sun Devils ahead of, to date, probably the biggest game in the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Did that one do it for you? Did 45 get you
Got
going?
you got me going.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts because as we start off with the BearDown Award, I
hmm
was remiss. I made a tough call and didn't watch the game, and I don't regret it, but I'm also like I have a little FOMO. So
Yeah.
let's go through the BearDown Awards for the game, and then I want to hear from you just more qualitatively what I missed.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'm gonna
You're
start.
gonna yeah,
Yeah,
kick it off,
if that is that cool. So
please.
as someone who didn't watch the game, and if you found the long form highlights, they were disastrously edited. It almost felt
Oh
like
no.
it almost felt like it was a AI, job or something. It was like they cut off baskets that were made and highlights and stuff.
Pour, pour one out for our homie Matthew Loves
Yes,
Ball.
I know. I
Yeah, the
miss I
YouTube
miss him
channel.
totally. I'm
Yeah,
missing him.
sad.
So my Bear Down Award is not a stretch. Somebody you
Yeah.
and I have been highlighting since the beginning as a guy that we never lost faith in, giving us
hmm
credit on that. When a lot of folks are frustrated, but Jaden Bradley, 21
Whew.
points, 5 boards, 4 assists, no turnovers, 11 shots, 21 minutes. So, 1 for 1 from three, 4 for 4 from the line, one steal, electric off the bench. He is now, via hoop math, he is over 50% field goal percentage at the rim on the season for
Wow.
the
We
first
wanted that.
time. Yep, that's
Yeah.
what we've been tracking. I'm gonna just list a couple things on his
hmm
progression that I think people need to know if they don't. He's 14 of his last 20 from the floor, and if I recall, I believe two of those misses were late shot clock heaves.
Mm.
So at Colorado, he had like a 30-footer
Yeah.
that he got up on the rim, and then at ASU, at least gauging on the highlights, I think he had a late clock heave as well. So 14 for 20, including two late clock heaves, and he has not had a turnover in the month of February.
Huh.
His last turnover in a game was January 27th at Oregon. He had one
Amazing.
turnover. The previous games, the two games prior to Oregon, he had zero turnovers in the game against Oregon State, zero turnovers against UCLA, one turnover against USC, and about the sloppiest game of the year. And then we're all the way back to mid-January in the loss to WSU. So effectively, Jaden Bradley, since we lost to Washington State, has committed two turnovers.
Crazy.
And he's playing more. I mean, that included
Yeah.
the three overtimes against Utah. He played 29 minutes. At Colorado, he played 27 minutes. He also had 5 steals in the game against USC. So I think he more than made up for his one turnover. He People have said it on the board. Shout out Wildcat Authority. By the
Always.
way, if most of you probably are on Wildcat Authority, if you're finding us through other means, there was a pretty hefty visitor list for the Arizona State game that
Oof.
we all were privy to. So if you want to find out who's visiting right now at the U of A and what recruits we're looking at, that was pretty
Check
cool.
it
Mike,
out.
you made a great point because so go over to Wildcat Authority for that info. Mike made a great point after seeing the list. Most of them were all of them
All
Arizona,
of them.
all of them.
All
So
of them.
so
Yeah.
I'm going to let you talk about that strategy. Jaden Bradley, congratulations. Let's keep it rolling. And that doesn't even get into the defensive side of the ball, but co-bear down award of the week goes to you because not only have you been tracking Jaden, but you said it last week, the Evan Maya
Yeah.
stat of his importance. Now, after watching Jamal Shed in Houston last night, I can't say that Jaden Bradley is the most important point guard in the country. That guy's like Mad Max beyond Thunderdome or something.
Yeah, it's
He is a
scary.
beast, and I remember him
Yeah.
from the Sweet 16. Yeah, he killed us. But
Yeah.
um, clearly, Jaden Bradley is worthy of some merit, and he's playing a really unique role for a his selflessness cannot be underscored in an era of, individualistic, fast progressing college sports to pro sports pipeline. Here you have a 5-star guy who transfers to come off the bench, backing up an 18-year-old in his same class. That is some serious, and hopefully he's handling it well. I don't know. Behind the scenes, he might be throwing a fit, but I don't think you can play this well and learn and progress in this type of collectivist system if you're
Yeah.
not bought in and selfless. So I'm assuming pretty high character kid, and just
Yeah.
all the kudos.
Yeah. And I don't want to pull on a character thread, not knowing, actual details, but it was
Yeah.
interesting that there was questions during like a press conference recently to Tommy about, how is he handling it and sort of like the people around him kind of thing they were hinting at. And Tommy just kept saying like, Jaden has had a lot of patience with me as the coach to keep asking him to, have good habits and do all these things and to embrace this role. And, clearly that's turning out really well. Like that's coming to fruition, which is really, 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 really cool. And hopefully what that means, not to look too far ahead, but for next year, we're not going to have Caleb Love in that starting lineup. We likely don't have Pella Larson in that starting lineup. And so there's room for guards in there. And, Jaden's making the case that like he absolutely deserves to have that starting spot, which is really cool to see.
I mean, he's shooting 47% from three on the year. And yeah, he shoots like,
It's
he
the
usually
smallest
shoots
sample
one a
size
game.
of all
Totally.
time. Yeah.
Totally. But he looks comfortable.
Yeah,
And
no, he
I,
does. Looks
I
really
would,
comfortable.
I would argue that similar to Pella and
Mhm.
Keshad, a high percentage also shows a high IQ and a self-awareness, knowing
Totally.
what your limitations are. And
Yeah.
so while I would never say like we need to run a play for Jaden at the end of the game for an open three,
Hmm.
I like it if the ball happens to find him and he's got his feet set.
It looks so pretty when he takes them that you think, gosh, why not? Why not all the time? But you're right. He's taking them at the right times. Yeah.
Who'd
Uh,
you take? Yeah.
yeah. Bear down award for me, and it was partly because I watched the game. I was at a friend's house at a barbecue, which was great. I hadn't seen people in a while because of the health issues with my kid, with my baby boy. He's doing great. But we were able to swing by and catch the beginning of the game, and then I recorded and scooted back home and caught the rest of it on recording. The beginning of the game, Caleb Love, man, like this was not like some like bonkers Caleb Love game. Like this isn't at Oregon where he completely went off. But the beginning of the game, man, that guy knew the assignment. Like he was in attack mode. He did not want anything to do with ASU being in our building. Like he had the crowd going, he had the team going. Um, the big dunk, big three. I thought all of our guards played great. Pella had a really, really quiet game, which is totally fine. But you think about
Seven
Kylan.
boards, 5 assists, I think Pella
Did
had.
he really?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah.
So just quiet on the points, but that's awesome. Um, obviously JB Kylan had a wonderful game. He deserves a lot of credit. Conrad Martinez, an amazing game off the bench, amazing. I know that you
Hey,
love
that
Connie.
you and I have been in his. I have had
You
faith in him since
especially,
the
yeah.
beginning. I think like if he's the backup point guard next year, whatever circumstances unfold, I'm comfortable with it. It probably
I
makes
am too now.
sense. It probably makes sense to have, a combination of two guys in front of him or just around him. But as a third or fourth guard, 8 to 10 minutes a game in certain games where he can just get after the point guard and distribute, I'm in for that. I'm ready.
Teams are going to absolutely despise that playing
Yeah.
against us. And if it's Kylan and JB, and then he's that third potential, third ball handler, third like
Hmm.
kind of primary kind of point guard
Yeah.
guy,
There you go. Yeah.
you feel really good. And if one of those guys for whatever reason isn't here, you assume you bring in a similar kind of high impact guy through the portal probably, and
Probably.
then
Yeah.
he's still in that same kind of position. So I feel so good about that guard group after the little bit of tape that we saw from him previously, and then to see him now in that game. A division, man, I like that was bonkers.
The
Uh,
vision, but more so similar to what you're talking about with Love.
yeah,
There are players who can be in their own skin and
mm,
don't get knocked off their feet, right? This
yeah,
was the thing that everyone sort of didn't trust about Tubelis. It was like,
hmm
gosh, the numbers are good. He can make shots, but we just don't trust him to have the spine. And you look at guys like Love and guys like Martinez, and you're like, those guys are not going to get knocked off
no,
their center.
you never doubt it. Yeah,
So
they may have a
they
bad
have
game here or there.
they have their
Sure,
shortcomings, of course. And
they're human, but
But like
Yeah,
Conrad,
because
you feel like if you put him in the game, he's going to give you his full effort. And
he's a gamer, right? Like
he's a game. There you go. He's
I
a gamer.
I've seen so little of it, but man, I believe like I know it. You can see it. You're like, oh my god, like, kid's a gamer.
Well,
Like,
I feel that way about Borvichinen too, but
I
we
do.
probably yeah
I do too. And
we've probably said enough about him for people.
we probably have. I just
Go for it.
one little add on. You look at the stat sheet. He had like a zero game. He did like three things in his limited minutes that like were just so close to being perfect. He like missed like a bunny, and he like had a rimmed out a three, which would have been his first for the year for a
We're
bummer.
still
But
waiting on that one.
I know
I
it's
know.
ridiculous. Our 3 point shooting champ from the Red Blue game hasn't made a three yet. But anyway, that's for the future. This is for the here and now. BearDown Award for me was Caleb and just setting that tone and really showing everybody. And what that says to me, and we all knew it, but it's another reminder that he's always going to show up with that as we continue to go towards these bigger moments, right? We got to close out the season. He gives it, like he cares. We're gonna have to go to LA and win some games. He's gonna care. We're gonna have to play in that first tournament and then the real tournament. That's the guy that you don't have to remind him of what this moment means. He clearly knows it.
Yeah, it's so valuable.
Yeah,
It's so necessary. So I'd love to hear more about since I missed the game.
yeah,
If anyone knows where to find a replay, man, let me know. FS1, I couldn't find. But so, last week we were really diving into this concept of 3-point percentage defense and how much
yeah.
can you actually defend versus just chance. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that with some more of your favorite scattergrams today. But so I think
Scattergrams.
ASU shot 25% from three, 36% overall from the field. Just from your eye test, how much would you say was due to our defensive focus, effort, connection, all the stuff that we're stressing about all year?
Um, Yeah, I honestly would have to go back and look again and see how much of that was actually our doing. It's difficult, right? Because like you said, you can look at the stat sheet and see that hey, they shot poorly. Oh, we must have done something right. But there's games like Colorado or Alabama where like, hey, those guys are actually pretty open and they just clanked shots.
Right.
Certainly our energy and effort put them off balance, right? Where they felt like they desperately needed those shots rather than they felt like they were going to hit those shots. That's what it seemed like to me. Is that especially our offensive production just put them into a place where they needed to shoot those shots in order to stay in the game, and that just didn't happen for them. So
And it speaks to how much pressure our offense puts. Again, like we talked about at the beginning of the year, the best defense against Arizona is to make shots, and
mhm.
sometimes our best defense is our offense because it is really hard to keep up with us when we're in this connected, efficient place. Yeah.
100%, right? And I think we saw that against like Utah, the first game against Utah at home. And
Yes.
that first half, they were really close on us. In that second half, we really started to pull away. And I think Craig Smith noted in the post game, those guys were, they got us out of our offensive rhythm. And I don't know that it was solely because of our defensive effort. I think it was largely because of that offensive productivity just puts you into a position where you're just like, shoot, how are we
You
gonna
feel that you're not that comfortable. Yeah.
No, yeah. So yeah, I love that. And when I think about how we lost to Washington State last time, where we just weren't very productive offensively,
Right.
um, I'd like to think that that's not going to be the mojo on this one. But is it time to have some thoughts about Washington
Yeah.
State?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I want to say, when you say that, I was watching, like probably a lot of people watched Iowa State, Houston. I got to
Hmm.
see the first half of that game last night. And what I keep coming to in this discussion about 3-point defense and drop coverage and how we face ball screen, Houston is so fun to watch in their defensive schemes because
Yeah.
they'll run everything from the blitz coverage. Well, shoot, I don't think they mess with drop coverage, but when they started out with Iowa State, they were just doing straight switches.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
And
just
they're so good
like
at that. They're
they're
so good
so
at
good
that.
at that. And then
Yeah.
they would sprinkle in a blitz and they would sprinkle in a hedge. And they
Yeah.
got beat a few times, but I think Iowa State had 23 points at the half. And then Iowa State, I didn't get to see the second half, but they ended up 9 of 17 from three. So they figured something out. Um,
Yeah.
but I think what I notice about Arizona, and I think why a lot of us feel so unsettled with the drop coverage, is there's a difference between being open and being comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and I think that's what you're speaking to with
Yeah.
Utah. And when we have offensive pressure, people can be technically open, but maybe they're not that comfortable. And
No.
I think what I'd like to see is when the game circumstances are not in our favor and these teams start rolling like FAU, Stanford, Washington State in the first half, that's where I think some of the maybe the harder to measure value is in changing those coverages. And
Hmm.
if you can be versatile enough to throw in a blitz coverage, it just gets it just keeps them a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know. And again,
No, I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not in a position to be giving tactical advice.
So
I'm
Tommy
looking.
Lloyd.
No, and not at all. And
Yeah,
that's not actually what I'm trying to do. I'm more
sure.
posing that as an idea that, there in every ball screen coverage you give up something. And Houston, I was watching with my son and my dad, and I was like, watch this blitz coverage, and I think they got beat, and it was a layup. It's like it's an all out, all or nothing coverage.
Yeah,
And if you get beat, it's a layup. And you have to have exceptional athletes who are really connected and aggressive to pull that off.
yeah,
So
yeah. Or,
I don't
or
know.
an
I like
open
to see,
three, right? Yeah,
yeah, or an open three. I just like to see
yeah.
us. I, I guess I just like to see us be the aggressor on defense in whatever tactics that takes. And I don't know. I think we've got the personnel to do it. I know we're not Houston, nobody is, but I also don't think we can we need to sit there and let guys dribble into 17-foot jumpers, especially like
Do,
guys like Miles Rice.
yeah, certainly not. Do you have that turnover percentage
Hmm.
chart that I
Let's
put
do
into
it.
that chat into the chat?
Here
So
we
that
go,
this
folks.
year's
Enable screen
scatter
share. Mike's,
scatter.
I had the 3 up. You want the turnover one? Which one is it? The one with the Arizona Alabama one or the
No,
whole
no, the other one.
NCAA? Okay.
Yeah.
Here comes Mike's parade of scattergrams.
I told
They're
you I was only going to
awesome.
use like one of these,
They're
and
awesome.
here I am talking about all of them. So this is a ton of stuff, obviously, but you can see Arizona just above in that top right quadrant. There we are. Um, and so this is us with our turnover percentage. To the right is better for us, and then the opponent's turnover percentage, us how much we turn them over higher is better.
So you want to be in this quadrant. And by the way, here's the two elite teams playing last night. So if you can catch
Yeah,
that
exactly.
replay, if you're a fan of breaking down basketball film, like try to find the replay of that game last night because that was
And
unbelievable defensive
tough
display.
defense,
Iowa
right?
State
Yeah.
too. Iowa State. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Those guys are
Yeah.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're never going to be the least turnover prone team, right?
Hmm.
Just Tommy's defensive or offensive philosophy of just, hey, let's like continue to move the ball, make passes, make mistakes of trying, right? Like, and that's okay, especially with our pace. But our ability to turn over teams is, I think, a big difference maker between this year and last year. And
Yeah.
so if you see where we are in that, we're just barely in that top right quadrant, which is great. There's a really good place to be. That's totally fine. Um, if can you pull up the last year's with Arizona, Alabama?
Yeah.
And so the difference is versus last year. Um, Last year we just simply didn't turn teams over like that. And so instead of having like I don't know, like a what 18 or something percent turnover percentage, we're down to more towards like 15. There's Arizona and Alabama. And we're in that bottom left quadrant, which is not where you want to be. And why are we, why are we highlighted there? Well, both of those teams lost in the first round.
Mm.
Highly seeded. You expected a lot of them.
Well,
They have both
Alabama
lost.
lost in the Sweet 16. Yeah.
Oh, but did they? I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
But they lost to San Diego State ahead of where their seating would imply. So point
That's what I
still
mean. Yeah, they
still
were they
taken.
were they were upsetted teams. Yes.
Hmm.
So just good to see. And speaks to your point of like, hey, we our defense needs to be active and annoying in order to set up our offense, I think.
So this is last year.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this would say if we're looking at the A, we're turning last year we turned the ball over slightly above 16%, and
Hmm.
our against was around maybe 14 and change. So we were actually in a
Yeah.
negative turnover percentage ratio.
And this year we're at more like 13.5%
17. Yeah.
and 17. Yeah. So
Well, and
much, much better.
yeah, and especially since the last few games have just been really, really solid. I hope that
Yeah.
trend continues. Yeah.
Yeah. Deeply. Washington State riding a 7-game win streak, right? Versus our 6-game win streak. Hopefully that our win streak continues and theirs doesn't.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the offensive efficiency in the zone and the Sean Miller PTSD effect of the
Yeah.
fan base? Because Washington State
Yeah.
plays that pretty sticky zone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So a user on Wildcat Authority reached out to me. They asked for I share some stats with them from time to time, and they said, hey, my friend group has had a question. Do we suck against the zone, basically?
Mm.
Um, and the answer was statistically, we score the exact same number of points per possession versus the zone as we do against man defense, which is crazy
Mm.
to me. That seems one, it's just you don't normally score the exact same, but two, that we've been pretty darn good against the zone, obviously because we are pretty darn good against the man. Now, what I found super interesting out of that though was the we get zoned way more than the average team. We get
Mm.
zoned like 6 times as much as Kansas does, for
Mm.
example. Which is we're a good 3-point shooting team. You think you wouldn't want to zone us that much. I don't know if it's because of something about the Pac-12, but there's about 13, 15, somewhere in that range percent of the time we're getting zoned.
Huh.
Um, and it's inherently kind of ugly to play against a zone, but we
Can
do.
slow people down. They have to
Yeah,
reorganize. Yeah.
exactly. You take a jab. It's not.
Hmm.
There's nothing there. You kind of pass. You kind of work it around. But we have been a good scoring team against the zone. Obviously, we weren't against Wazoo last time. So hopefully, they get it together and step it up and figure it out this time.
This is my moment for the stat of the day, and
Yeah,
it's gonna hand it back to you. So,
please.
I think again, this is essentially the sample size is so small that it's essentially anecdotal evidence, but
Mm,
I think it's still intriguing evidence that we talked a little bit earlier in the year about um, the disturbance of the first 2 years and how many double-digit losses we had, even though we had so few
yeah,
losses. It's kind of a weird paradox. So I was just thinking off my head, it seems like every time we lose to a team we're going to play again in the season, how do we bounce back from that? Because we
sure.
still have yet to lose, knock on wood here, we still have yet to lose twice in a season to the same team. Probably would have put an asterisk next to the last year's Pac-12 final if they had Hawkes and
Right.
I'm sorry,
Or
the
Clark
wing,
and
Clark and
yeah,
Bona. I mean,
yeah,
those
yeah,
guys were really, really good. Um, but check this out. So the two teams we played our first year that we then played again later in the season, right?
yeah.
UCLA, UCLA we lost to by 16, and then we came back and beat them by 10 at home. We also beat them in the Pac-12 final, but I'm not counting that. So that
Yeah.
is a plus 26 margin. Okay. Against CU, we beat them at home. We lost in Boulder by 16 again, and we beat them in the Pac-12 tournament by 10. So another plus 26. Okay.
Mm,
Last year, we had 6 opportunities to face teams that we lost to. Utah, coming off of Maui, we lost by 15. Then in Tucson, we beat them by 26. That's a plus 41
ooh,
improvement. Washington State, we lost at home by 13. Then we got them in Pullman by 5. That's plus 18. Oregon, Stanford, UCLA, ASU. We came back and beat all those teams plus 34 to plus 11. Um,
so
this
you're
year,
thinking? Oh, sorry.
this
Go ahead.
this year, this year, and this is a good trend, aside from Stanford. So Stanford, we lost by 18, as everyone knows. We came back and won by 11. It's a plus 29. We have yet to face the two other teams that we will face, Washington State and Oregon State, both of whom beat us by 3 points. I'd like to at least say that, at least these are one possession games we're losing now. So
Yeah,
it's a small,
that's a
it's a
it's
small
no.
silver lining, but
Yeah.
so I would say with Tommy's track record, and again, I'm not going to take some of these big spreads because losing by like the UCLA loss last year was -9. We won by 2 in the Pac-12 final without two of their best players. Stanford, we went from -9 to +11. ASU, we went from -1 to +19. So it's not going to be, like I said, our average is 25. I don't know if I mentioned that. Our average so far in the second game after a loss, playing the same team again, is +25 scoring margin.
Wow,
I don't know how that lines up with the national normative data, but it seems pretty darn encouraging.
that seems very encouraging.
Again, given the
Uh,
fact that he's given when you add the context of his overall record and the fact that he hasn't lost 2 games in a row to anybody and also 2 games in a row to any one team in a Pac-12 schedule, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Now, I don't want to jinx all that, but what I would say is if the numbers are consistent, I think we're looking at like an anywhere from a, 6 to 20 point victory over Washington State.
you're saying this is easy money. Take Arizona in the po- and lay the points.
Well, I think Vegas always knows more than we do, but I think Sheer and Mike were talking about it earlier. Shout out AZ Wildcats podcast that Washington State or Zona will probably be a heavier favorite than we're comfortable with again, which they have been.
Yeah,
I don't think Vegas knows what to do with Arizona at this point. I wouldn't, but I think it's probably more of an 8, 6 to 10 point range based on these
yeah,
numbers. But again, they could win by 30. You just don't know. I think Washington State's a really good team.
yeah.
And they're a
Ken
slow
Palm,
tempo team. I don't think it's going to be a high score.
yeah, Ken Palm has it as 11 right now. I think I saw.
Well, there you go.
I think it was Evan Maya that who I've increasingly grown to love. So if anybody's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
using evanmaya.com, please
It's a
do.
good one. Yeah.
I think he had it way higher than that. I want to say. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick.
Look, we said last week ASU is going to either be 40 or overtime. And
Right, yeah.
I don't think our team's going to have any trouble with focus on Thursday, but I do think Washington State's a tough matchup for us for sure.
And I'm curious about, and here it is. Yeah, he's got the line as like 13, which is, he's got Arizona scoring 83 points and
Yeah,
holding Wazoo below 70.
right. I think it's going to be
S-
somewhere in that 75 to 83 to 60 to 70 point range.
So your point about a slower pace, it touches on something that I've been thinking about recently. Somebody mentioned to me hey, I saw something where teams that play with a lot of pace typically underperform in March,
Hmm.
or high seeds anyways, that play with a lot of pace typically underperform in March. And I pulled a thread on that, and there's a guy, Ryan Hammer is his name. He's a
Hmm.
basketball analyst, kind of content guy, and he has what he calls like the trapezoid of excellence. And
Hmm.
it is a scatter plot, of course,
Nice.
that is um, adjusted efficiency, net efficiency. So how offense, defense, how good you are versus your opponent, and then pace. And if
Mhm.
you it essentially says like you need to stay kind of middle of the road as far as pace, but the more effective you are in that net rating, the more leeway you have. But generally, teams that stay near the center on pace are more versatile and therefore have the ability they can play up in pace, they can play down in pace because their average is sort of right in the middle, right, or
Hmm.
near the middle. And that in order to play 6 games and win 6 games in March, you have to be able to play a variety of styles.
Yeah.
It's not lost on me that is probably true. That you're going to come up in March against teams that it could be an underseeded team that plays a style of play that you don't feel comfortable with, and that's enough to knock you off, right?
Yeah.
What I think I've seen recently out of this team is that they have been able to play kind of at least a slower pace than we did in the beginning of the year. Although we're still relatively high on the national rankings, um, our pace has dropped by I think like 5 possessions versus how we started the season versus how we've been in the last like 5 games.
Yeah.
So this will be a really, really interesting one to circle to say, can we win a game scoring 80 points? If that's what
Yeah.
it is.
Well, and also, even just looking at raw possessions per game as a measure
Hmm.
of how fast someone plays is really flawed because
Right.
actually it could be an indicator that our defense has improved
Sure.
because they're spending longer possessions. Also, I noticed just anecdotally watching Colorado, there were several possessions where our point guard kept the ball into the mid-teens on the shot clock before we even initiated, like before, not initiated, they're probing different ball screen options, and then
Hmm.
they're making one or two passes and we're at the rim, but that's 23 second possession. That's actually kind of a long possession, but
Yeah.
they're playing with fluidity, continuity, and tempo is different than I think an overall number of possessions per game as an indicator of, versatility in the tournament, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and I agree with that.
It's not like Loyola Marymount where it's like if they don't get the initial shot, then they're in trouble. It's like
Yeah.
actually we look pretty versatile in our fluidity. We try to play with pace, meaning we try to play fluidly and with continuity offense. And
Hmm.
then possession, a lot of those possessions are transition, missed shots and turnovers. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it does get, obviously I was going to convince myself that the bad numbers don't mean Arizona's going to be bad, but
I think I'm
I do.
defending us too. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I do have some additional confidence because of those reasons. Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um in back to the zone thing with Washington State.
Yeah.
So do you want to say what those numbers are and what they mean in the context of half court efficiency? Because when I questioned it, you helped clarify that our
Yeah. So
overall points per possession is influenced by non-half court sets, which is another way that those teams, like really how you slow down teams like Arizona, Gonzaga, um, teams that want to pressure, turnover, run, is like you just don't turn the ball over
yeah,
because then you keep them in half court. Yeah.
you have to take them away from transition
Yeah.
opportunities, right?
Right.
And yeah, so what you're speaking to is it was in the zone or against the zone rather, and against man, we score about 0.992 points per possession.
Almost one.
Um,
Yeah.
Almost one. Yeah, you can think of a 50%, 2 point jumper creating 1 point per
Right.
possession, right?
Right.
So that's actually really, really good. 0.992 in the half court is really good. 0.992 if that's just what we were generating largely, that would be really bad, honestly. So we haven't.
Yeah, like media, it's probably in the 150 to 180 range, right?
Yeah, it'd be substandard, right?
Right.
So you look at, I think the Washington State game was probably our worst efficient, our worst offensive efficiency game, and I think we were just about at
About
one.
one. Yeah. 70.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So now how do we get it? So we're obviously not that mediocre. We're much better. So how do you get there? It's not just that 0.992 in the half court. You add in transition opportunities, which we score really heavily on, or score really
Right.
well on. As we talked about in last week, we
Right.
were talking about rim looks and quick threes out of the transition three. So that's it's a we're pretty darn good in the half. You're not quite getting above where you want, but you add in those transition, and I think you're right and that's part of what I think that stat was saying about, or maybe that's why part of why teams that play with pace a lot of times they're playing, like you said, with pace because of they live off of transition opportunities. Maybe if those opportunities aren't there, then you're just stuck in the half court, and what can you do? And thankfully, we've been pretty darn good in the half court this
Right.
season.
Well, and it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense too, because I'm guessing the average number of possessions in a game is somewhere in the 66 to
Yeah.
68 range, right? And
Yeah.
so most teams are around that 1 point per possession. If you keep us in a half court and you don't turn the ball over and you don't miss a lot of shots, then those games are going to end up in the 60s. And I've always
Yeah.
wondered why Gonzaga could score 100 points 6 straight games, and then all of a sudden they're just 63 to 59. It's like, whoa, what
Yeah.
happened? But it actually makes a lot of sense. The efficiency is actually not that much different. You've just tipped it and this happened with Lutz teams too. you
Yeah.
would you would tip that by not turning the ball over, by slowing down the possession on the opponent's end, I mean, and then keeping them to one shot, limiting putbacks. I got a stat for you. I want to see,
Yeah,
without you
please.
without you looking at hoop math,
Okay.
as we start to gauge this team's potential and looking forward here. Um, what would be your guess as to this year's team's percentage of field goal attempts at the rim? Would you say,
Oh,
well,
the
let's, I
total
don't,
percentage of our shots being at the rim?
yes, I don't need you to give a percentage because that'd just be a guess that you could probably, but would you expect that we are getting more shots at the rim this year, same as last year, or fewer than last year?
I would expect more.
Okay. How much more do
Yeah.
you think?
I would expect significantly more, like
Yep.
40% more. Yeah.
Yep, you're right. So we're at about 46% of our shots at the rim this year, which
Okay.
is fascinating to
That's
me because
that's amazing.
our for the first time in his 3 years, our top two field goal attempt players are our two starting guards
Yeah. Yeah.
by a lot.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
last year we were at 37% of our shots at the rim with all this hubbub about Tubelis. It really speaks to the lack of guard play last year and the ability to
Yeah.
get to the rim with Henderson,
Yeah.
Ramey, Kerr. And this year, the guards are actually doing a better job. And I think that speaks back to Bradley, along with the improvement of Larson and the emergence of someone like Lewis. Interesting, last year, we had an incredible team rim finish percentage. It was
Yes.
67,
Yeah.
and Balo was at 74.
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
so that's why we're feeling like he's missed so many. I don't know if there's a hand
Yeah.
injury or something, but he's trending up.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just the looks that he got last year. And I think I spoke to that earlier,
Mm,
in one of our earlier
with the high-low
discussions
stuff.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, the high low stuff, and then Kerr.
Kerr.
Kerr is like for all of like everybody want to rag on Kerr. He was an exceptional post entry pass
Totally. Yeah.
point guard. So yeah, yeah, that's really interesting, and I think that again, it's thinking back to last week and thinking about rim pressure. That just gives me a lot of confidence in the floor
Yeah.
of this team that you've got guards, and especially as these guards turn it on, you see more out of Bradley and Kylan coming back. Like these guys are going to get downhill and put pressure on the rim, and it's not dependent upon finding a high-low opportunity.
Right.
You know,
And one more screen I'll share,
please.
um, where I was kind of fiddling around before you came on. Let's see. The hoop math data that we've been referencing throughout the season. We've talked
Yeah.
a lot about Boswell's free throw rate and Love's free throw rate and where there's potential. This is, by the way, 36.5 is our best free throw rate as a team since Lloyd's taken over. To be fair,
Cool.
he's been right around there all 3 years. It's like
Yeah.
you said, it's in the top 30% in Division One. It's really good.
Yeah.
Boswell has gone, if memory serves, I think when we were around Stanford the first time, I think he was around 8%. And so that's a really significant improvement.
Yeah.
I think the eye test would tell most of us that he seems like he's making a real strong effort to attack.
Attack more. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's an 81% free throw shooter. So I'd like to see that go up. If we can get him around 13 or 14 and Love up around 30, you can really take advantage of this. And you trade a couple of these like unassisted 3-point attempts, the step backs,
Yeah.
for attacking. And maybe you get a foul, or maybe you find Umar and maybe his field goal percentage at the rim can get closer to 70. That's just something that stuck out to me. I also noticed that something down here that could trend upward is the offensive rebound putback percentage, which is not superb.
No, I know it's not. It's funny.
It's we've missed a lot. Like he shot at
Yeah.
41%. Like that's a number that I would expect to go up. And Balo at 63 is just not where he's been.
Yeah.
It's fine, but I think we've all seen a lot of games where it's like, man, just finish that,
Yeah, totally.
So
Yeah,
I'm
we're one of the
hopeful.
best offensive rebounding teams in the nation, and so the ability for us to turn, I think, like what 65% scoring on our offensive rebounds into more, better than that. That's a lot of points you could pick up.
Totally.
Yeah, and those are backbreakers, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that they were able to defend well the first time, but we were able to get that offensive board and get
Yeah.
the bucket. Yeah.
So just in wrapping up today's for a few minutes, this will be an evolving question, right? I'm every fan is thinking this all the time on
Yeah.
some level. I was telling you before, as we have 6 league games, and then we have the Pac-12 tournament, and then we have the NCAA tournament. Now that we've got 25 games with this team,
Mm.
how are you framing what would make this a really satisfying season in the last phase?
It's really disappointing to only say March. you know? I don't want it to be that. I've tried to trend away from that as a fan, and I've heard other fans say, "Look, all that matters is March. I don't even tune in." You know, I don't want it to be that. This is the last Pac-12 season. That matters to me. You know,
Yeah.
I've always been a Pac fan, right? In my entire fandom, we've been in the Pac. I think
Right.
yours as well, right?
Yep.
So,
Mhm.
um, you know, I want us to win the conference, the regular season. I've never really cared that much about the tournament. Um, although I've enjoyed some tournament, you know, victories, you know,
Well, it's
certainly.
super fun.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's nice to have, you know, that little like cherry on top of the regular season, you know, if you can take it. But I really only care about win the conference, and so kind of I think 5-1, you know, that does it, and that makes me happy. Stay healthy in the
Mm.
tournament in Vegas, and and then, you know, do you want to, is the question how
You could,
far in?
I mean, you could put it in any terms you want: process, outcome,
Yeah,
energetics.
I'm talking outcomes here. Yeah, I mean, I think we all know what we want. You know, we everybody needs a Final Four for us to feel good about ourselves. An
Heal.
Elite Eight, yeah, to heal. An Elite Eight would at least stop the bleeding in a way.
Hmm.
A Final Four would do a lot to get us back to good health. Um,
Mm.
and how do we get there? Yeah, you know, guard play. Like the guard play that we've seen has been really good recently, and I just if those guys keep it up, I deeply believe. And then the bigs, that offensive rebounding and finishing, I think that's a great stat to circle. And if they can improve on that, keep up the offensive rebounding, improve on the finishing, wow,
Yeah.
tough to beat.
Yeah. I was
And you?
thinking, yeah, you know, I'm similar to you as you know, that over the years, and maybe this is a consequence of or a byproduct of being an Arizona fan. I've sort of like
Right.
survived fandom by de-emphasizing the tournament just because
Yeah, no kidding,
they've been
right?
so horrifying, most of these
Yeah,
tournaments. Um, but then I'm also like, you know, when I watch the tournament and I see all these teams, you know, every year there's teams that make it farther than we do that aren't as good as we are. And it's
farther
like,
than
why,
they should,
you
you
know,
know?
like why not us, you know? And
Yeah,
so I think this more than any other year is a year where I'm really outcome focused. And I feel like Tommy,
yeah,
fair or not, Tommy, he's got, I mean, he just signed a huge extension, puts him with those top names in coaching in terms
hmm
of dollar value, income value. He needs to produce, man. Like this is the year you have four seniors, you have two guys who've been in the championship game, you've got several guys that will play professionally somewhere.
hmm yeah,
Um,
definitely.
you've got there's really like outside of maybe like a backup athletic power forward, you really don't have any gaps in your roster. There's no excuses. Last year we had excuses. The year before we had excuses. I think what I want to see is, yeah, I may be in the minority like you. I think winning the regular season Pac-12 title is a conference title is number one goal.
Yeah,
Um, and the conference tournament, it's really fun as a fan, but I think it's really not great for the athletes. And
no, it's
like
terrible.
playing three games back to back is really hard. And yeah, sure, you can look back and cherry pick examples where, you know, I think UConn played five games and then maybe they even had like a five overtime game against Syracuse, and then they went and played really well in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
I'm not saying like from a fatigue standpoint, I think they can manage that. But each of the last 2 years, we've played six games. We're 6-0, but we had crucial injuries that cost
yeah,
us performance in the tournament. I'm not saying we would have advanced farther, but probably if Ballo doesn't break his hand, I'm
yeah,
guessing that's worth a few points. If Kerr doesn't get hurt both years, I'm guessing that's
yeah,
worth a little bit. So we've been really lucky with health. It feels like sometimes this team is held together by duct tape, but they're, you know, Pella, Boswell, they're
yeah,
Ballo, they're all like on the verge. And so I think the ideal would be let's keep let's keep looking excited to play these Pac-12 games. They're
yeah,
really, like I said last week, and I'll own it. I said, hey, if you see Arizona blow out ASU, you can start to get bullish on us again in terms of our focus, intensity, connectedness. And those are the things that
totally.
propel us. Those are things, it's not going to be who's going to take the big shot and all these like things that the media likes to overplay. It's things like intensity, focus, mindfulness, connectedness. Do you have a collective purpose, and how well is that expressing itself through the team? And it feels like we've hopefully regained a little of that. I think um, people are pretty confident this week. So yeah, I think that there's a perfect setup to play well against Washington State, and then a perfect
And
setup to be let down against UW, like I said last week.
yep,
So UW's not that good. I mean, they're 60 in Ken Palm. They're not a bad team.
no,
Um,
no, they're not tragic.
but like, let's come out and and play with the assertiveness like a Houston that says,
Mhm.
hey, like we're excited to play. Like this is
Yeah,
our house, and you come in here, you're gonna get attacked. And that's what we saw against ASU. That's what you're talking about with Caleb. Let's go take that to the neutral site games and get really excited to play. I haven't
yeah,
seen us look excited to play in the NCAA tournament enough. I've seen us excited to play in the Pac-12 tournament, but that's
right.
concerning, to be honest. I think we need to
Yeah, yeah,
think bigger,
bigger.
you know. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think, and this could be the team. I think we're all hoping that this is the team that starts to kind of heal the heal the sort of narrative that like, oh God, here we go again in the NCAA tournament. You know, I think this could be the team that starts to turn it, and that's what we're all
yeah,
hoping.
yeah. It's funny because you know, I think originally maybe I thought maybe it was just, oh, well, that was maybe it's just a bad thing that happened to Miller, and it's just, and it was the end of Lute's era, and like, but now Tommy's here, and like Tommy's gonna be fun, like Tommy's not gonna fail early, and then
Clean slate.
obviously,
Yeah.
yeah, and obviously it doesn't, we just keep getting kind of more of the same, and so
Oh,
would be lovely to shake all of that off. I hate getting replied to on Twitter that we haven't won a Final Four, in anybody's adult life.
we haven't won a NCAA tournament game since before you were a parent.
Yeah.
I think the last one we won was what, St. Mary's with Lowry and Kadeem Allen, and then we lost the 8 point lead to Xavier in the Sweet 16 with 3 minutes to go.
You're
That was
saying
the
we
last
haven't won?
Was that the last time we won a tournament game? Was
No, no,
2007?
no. We won against against TCU and whatever team we played before them with
Right,
Ben.
but before that we hadn't
Yeah, yeah,
won.
yeah.
Okay, so Tommy
Before
won.
that we hadn't before that we hadn't won since Laurie and
Oh
Raleigh breaking his hand
God,
against St.
that
Mary's, which is
and
which is a
that's it.
long time ago.
Right, and that Xavier loss was just another. It was like it was a
No,
Sweet
it's
16
terrible.
game, but it was like, come on, like you got to win
No, it
that.
was embarrassing. Yeah, you're
Oh
get Laurie Markkinen getting beaten by JP McCurra in the post will always haunt my dreams.
God, yeah,
Um,
that big dude who looked like a walk on who just chucked a
oh,
12-foot hook shot in. It was just
that
like,
guy, yeah,
what?
that guy was great. Yeah, so I think process wise, you're spot on that,
Yeah,
and it starts with process before it gets results, right? So process wise, Washington, you got to win that game. I mean, sorry, Washington State, obviously that's a big game to win on Thursday, and then you have to follow that up with
you
continued
gotta come
success.
back. You gotta come
Yeah,
back and play excited. And just
yeah,
to fill out, like, I just don't. I want to say we need to make the Final Four, but those matchups, like we could. I just want to watch the tournament games, and wherever we end up, feel like, all right, that was the real Arizona. You know, like
okay, yeah,
not like, because you could run into a really really good team in the second game, and they could bank in six threes. I mean, it's happened to us the last couple of years in the regular season. I don't I think this team's about as bulletproof as it gets. But like we talked about, everyone can shoot the three, and that's the big variable.
we'll keep looking at 3 point Arizona's 3 point defense, and maybe we'll pull up that scatter chart at some
Yeah.
point.
And
Um,
let's be honest, they're not, you know, they're not no none of these teams this year is like an all-time great team.
no,
They're like
no,
they're
the
not that
parity
much
is
difference between Arizona and a 7 seed that they might face in the second round, or an 8 seed they might face in like these are good teams. If you look at that,
yeah.
they're all really good teams. They've got players. So I'd like to think we could win a few games. I think if we make it to the Elite Eight, I think that like if we get to the second weekend, I think it tips a little bit where in our favor, where
Hmm.
we start
Yeah,
to
yeah,
attack, we start to like when we smell blood in the water and we have that excitement, then I think we're out of that fear kind of hesitance place.
yeah.
And I think the deeper we go, the more dangerous we are. Maybe that's the same for everybody, but maybe that's
I
just
think that
yeah,
I think the stage can get too big for some people, and
yeah.
sometimes the stage is too small for us. I,
Right.
you know, that can
That's what I
be
mean. Yeah.
that can sound like excuse making, but
No, I
that
think
does
that's well
look,
said.
yeah. So I
I,
think these guys are made for those big moments.
totally.
Caleb, you know, especially, you know, Keyshot is, and hopefully the young guards, Kylan and Jaden and KJ, continue to step up like they have been,
Yeah.
and we can meet them.
Right
So
on.
fingers crossed.
We'll talk more about that as we get closer. But
Yeah,
for this week, let's bear down against the Cougs and the
yeah,
Huskies, and we'll talk next week. And hopefully, we are, you know, this is the game that could effectively decide the league title, or at least
yeah,
give us a lot of breathing room that would be tough to
yeah,
come back from. We still got games to
yeah.
go. That Oregon game scares me a little. Hey, we got to go to Tempe, though they look kind of like a mess.
Yep.
Then we got to go to LA. So your backyard
Yeah. Let's
is
finish it
where
off
it
here,
could be
though.
decided. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get some breathing room. All right.
Anything in closing?
Uh, you know, forks down, wazoo up.
All right. All right. We'll bear down everybody, and we'll see you next week.